Good morning, Dame Pearlette Louisy. How are you doing?
Well, not too badly. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for allowing us to come into your home and have a chat with you. I know it must be a little bit difficult having spent 20 years in the public eye. You must be really anxious to
That's
get to private life.
Well, as a matter of fact, I've gotten so used to it that, in fact, now I may be having withdrawal symptoms.
So you're used to lights and cameras in
And
your
lights
face,
and
right?
cameras,
But
yes.
anyway, I really want to thank you for sitting down with me today. Why I was so interested in coming to see you is because, you know, the country is in a transition period at this point in time. We've just bid you farewell and we're looking forward to the appointment of our next Governor General. And I wanted to, you know, rewind the clock a little bit
Okay.
and just get a sense of what it feels like. You know, so I will start off by asking you if you can remember that fateful day so long ago when you got that call. You know, what did that feel
Yeah,
like? The phone rings.
Yes, in fact, it's kind of as clear as day, as they would say. I remember I tell people that it was a Wednesday evening. And why was it Wednesday evening? Because I was at home and I was the only day of the week that I was home on a Wednesday. On a,
Yeah.
actually home. I always had to go to choir practice, this, that, and the other. So that call came in about 10 in the evening. And so, and there was the Prime Minister, Dr. Anthony, on the other end of the line. And I said, yes, Prime Minister. And then he says, well, we were kind of wondering whether you would be interested in, in taking up the post of Governor General. I said, what? I said, you must be joking.
So that was a bolt out of the
It was
blue.
a bolt out of the blue. I mean, there wasn't any discussion, not in the media. I mean, you knew there was going to be a new Governor General,
Sure.
but these were not things you thought about as, and as an individual. And admittedly, I didn't for 1 minute, even with all the discussions, even think that, I could possibly be in the running. I mean, after all. I mean, maybe governors generals were traditionally a little bit older. I was 50 at the time. I had just, well, not just returned, but I was at Arthur and had been in the position of principal just for about 18 months.
Sure.
So, I saw that position as perhaps somewhere I would have been for a few more years. And then after that, because, the position of principal is a contract and you can't stay there for more than 8 years.
Yeah.
So I thought afterwards then I would perhaps move on to the regional scene, but I'm still in academia.
Yeah.
So education, and particularly regional education on a regional level was my interest.
So that was your career plan,
Yeah, that was
your
my
trajectory,
career. Yes,
which
that's
got
what it was.
completely derailed by that fateful
By
phone call.
Yes.
How easy or difficult was it for you to make the decision to accept?
Yes. Well, it was difficult. For one thing, I didn't think that I was cut out for the post. Admittedly, like a lot of people, I didn't really know what it entailed.
Okay.
So I was saying, but what do you do? And I thought, well, let me give it some thought. And then, of course, I couldn't discuss it, far and wide because, the whole thing was still shrouded in some secrecy.
Yeah.
So in the end, I have to admit I took an inordinately long time to make up my mind. I think the Prime Minister, he's known to have said he thought perhaps he had made the wrong decision by asking me because I took so long.
So he thought maybe you were a little too hesitant.
Yes.
A little reluctant.
Yeah, but afterwards, I discussed this with somebody and they said, what's that to think about? I said, yes.
Right.
And so I decided that, the next time he called, mind you, I didn't call him to say yes. I waited until he called.
My goodness. You kept him on tenterhooks.
Well, I said...
if he really wants it, he'll call back, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
so after making that decision, obviously you had to have a transition from private life to public life, and not just public life, but life as the head of state. What did you do to prepare?
Well, in fact, it all happened so quickly. I mean, talking about transition, I was at my desk at Sir Arthur on a Tuesday evening. I tried to put things together. Left about 6:30, and then I was sworn in the next morning.
Wow.
So there wasn't much time to think of the, usual, accoutrements, man. I just asked, I suppose I have to get myself a hat. That was the last thing on my mind. I sent a friend of mine to get a hat in town. So, and I thought, I have to admit that perhaps if I had thought of the gravity of the thing, I perhaps would have hesitated a little more. But I went into it, and as I have said before, I said to myself, my life and my career, to date had been not things I had planned, but things that had been, presented to me, and I seized the opportunity.
Right.
So I thought, yes, I'm going to take it. I'm going to, give it a shot. But I did ask the Prime Minister what exactly he wanted me to do with the post. And,
Okay.
And he said, define it as you want. And I thought that gave me the latitude, to do some of the things I did.
Right. Well, based on the sheer length of your tenure, I mean, you have served longer than our previous governors general combined. So it would be inevitable that you would have your own stamp, or you put your own stamp on the office. But did you or eventually have a specific goal or objectives for what you want the office to be, or was it more of an organic thing as you went along, it kind of took shape?
Yes, in the beginning, I stuck to the conventional activities, and then I started, as Dr. Anthony had suggested, to define the post, and I looked at the whole idea of being head of state. And what that should mean, and I thought, well, if you're head of state and head of of a people, you shouldn't be too far removed from them. At the same time, there has to be some distance. So that was really the balance in the beginning that I tried to put, sort of in my mind, and also in the mind of other people. Generally, I remember at the beginning, persons can be forward sometimes. And so when they drove past Government House, they would shout out, Pearlette, and I pretend I didn't hear.
Wow.
After a while, they got, the message that, there is some kind of...
You're not going to come out on the porch and wave.
And there's some kind of deference, and respect for the office.
Was it a struggle? Because, I mean, the anecdotes of your early years are that you would, sometimes try to slip your security detail and try to do your normal activities. How much of a struggle was it for you to adapt to being the head of state?
Well, I don't think that I tried to. I mean, they didn't allow me to sleep. I mean, I went to places where perhaps, some of my predecessors, didn't used to go before. So I mean, but my detail was always
I've seen
there.
you, shopping. And
well, that is
with your 80 cub,
Yeah, well, on a Saturday, I would go do the shopping. Particularly, there was a time when I didn't have a steward to do the normal groceries and
St. Lucia has never seen that before. Was that a deliberate thing, or was that just something that you felt you wanted to do?
I mean, before that, for example, going to the market on a Saturday. I mean, that was something, traditionally, you got up on a Saturday morning and you went to the market. So I continued that, for a while until I think one of my security said, well, maybe we would like
A little problematic
yes,
there,
we
yeah.
probably need to rethink that
Yeah,
a bit.
yeah.
And so that's why I stopped going to the market because it was so open.
Yeah.
And then took to go into the supermarket,
Okay.
because then it was, more control and so I did that because, it was something I did before. and I, before that I had tried and I said to somebody, well, either the steward or the ADC, I want so and so and so and so. And then when they got to the shop, they would, or the store, well, there's a pink one and a blue one. Which one would you want? And I figured out, And I said, but that was before the days of phones where you could take a picture
So they couldn't send a photo.
pink or blue. I said, to myself, I think it's much easier on you to just go there.
Yeah.
What brand you want.
Do it
Is
yourself.
It this and do it yourself. And also, it gave me the opportunity to, as I say, the people have to know you. The people have to see you. I mean, if you head of state. So I didn't see going out there as something that governors general couldn't do.
Right.
I mean, I know the population was a bit, every time they saw me, they would say, oh, they're allowing you to do that? They're allowing you to leave? You sort of I wanted to implement that government. I was not really a prison, really.
Well, as you had said a little while ago, this was not something that previous governors general had done. They were always very, very remote from the populace. So I imagine, a lot of St. Lucians felt excited to see their governor general.
Yeah, some of them were taken aback, and some would say, "You ready? You think you really think you should be out?" And I thought, well, as you say, I did have I had the driver, and I had the close protection officer. So,
One thing that St. Lucia noticed about your term in office is that not only did you handle the traditional state functions, receiving foreign dignitaries, etc., but you also kept up a vibrant social life in terms of you attended lectures and plays and cultural events, and you really had a very, very busy schedule. How did you manage?
Well, it was all a question of, I suppose, managing one's time. I mean, I told most people that invited me some. If I get sufficient notice, then I could arrange my schedule. What I tried never to do was to accept invitations for two events that would overlap, because I thought, sort of bit not quite the thing to go to an event, agree to go, and then have to get up halfway and say, sorry, I have to leave.
Yes.
I mean, I have committed myself to a particular event, and I still went there from start to finish. Mind you, some of these events lasted 4 hours, 5 hours. But I didn't have the luxury of getting up and saying, well, I'm had enough. Like people sitting at the back.
Right.
Do,
You have to sit through the entire thing.
Yeah. And so, admittedly, there were times when you thought, oh, this thing is not going to end yet. But generally, I said yes to the event or to the invitation, and
was that a policy, or is that your personality?
That's my personality.
Right, okay.
And also, as I said, the people, no matter what their station in life, what their organization, whether they're the elderly, the disadvantaged, as we say, or the youth, they like to know that there is support for the initiative, support for the effort. So sometimes I suspect sometimes my very presence at the activity, I didn't necessarily have to say anything. There were times when I had to speak and address people. But just your presence there, or my presence there, I felt was something they appreciated, and they interpreted it as my support for their efforts, however modest it was. And I know in the beginning people were a bit, looked askance at some of the activities I attended, or even where the things were held, even the venues, and say, can't go in this little place. I
Yeah.
said, what's wrong with this little place? I mean, you support it, and I have to admit, just my attending all these functions in all these different venues gave people, I think, the opportunity to upgrade or to up the standard of things.
Yes.
Because they would say, the Governor General is going to be in attendance, so they want to make sure they decorate the place, And
Starting
I think,
on time.
well, yes, although it was a challenge for some of them at the beginning, would call me when I'm already on the way to say, well, they're not ready yet. I say, sorry. Or they would say, one that particularly disturbed me, oh, well, Your Excellency, so-and-so minister is not here yet. So I used to say, make up your mind. You want the minister?
Yes, choose.
Or me.
Wow.
Yes. And so after a while, ministers, when they got there, and they knew if they were told the Governor General is going to be in attendance, they were there.
So
sometimes I didn't, they were not told, and they would come in and get real flustered at the fact that I'm already there. But
well, I want to credit you, I think, with helping to upgrade the standards of events and productions, because I think a lot of people had to get their act together, knowing that you were on your way, and knowing that if the Governor General says she would be there at X time, that it would be that and not a minute later.
Or sometimes I would, understand and say, okay, I'll give you 5 more minutes. So I would get there, park the car and stay in the car and give them 5 minutes. But the idea, we're not ready yet, I said, when we get there, I give you 5 more minutes wherever you are.
Gotta go.
Sometimes the master of ceremonies is not there on the time,
Wow.
The thing is 7 o'clock. How can you be master of ceremonies?
Yeah.
So these things, I think, helped, with events, event planning, event management for the organizers. So they knew,
Okay.
So
I want to take a slightly different tack now and speak about, your academic career. Now, I did a short interview with Dr. Anthony yesterday, speaking about his perspective of your appointment. And one of the ideas that I put forward to him was whether you may have been more effective in terms of national development had you stayed in your academic track and been principal for your entire term and done what you had planned to do. And he challenged that by saying that even in office you helped shape educational policy nationally and regionally. So I want you to talk to me about how you managed to balance your duties as head of state with your passion, because I know that it is a passion for educational policy development.
Yeah. Well, 2 things. On the regional level, no, on the local level, because, everybody in the education system knew that that was my passion. I would be invited very often to give keynote addresses for, conferences at the district level. At the National Principals Association, they had their meetings and their conferences, and very often, I would be asked to speak. They would give me whatever the theme, and I was the keynote speaker. So in that way, I brought my perspective, as to where we need to be going, what are our shortcomings, and I shared that with them. So I remained, within the, all the discussions on educational policy and direction. I have to admit, they didn't always take on what I said. Not because they didn't, not because it wasn't relevant, but because sometimes though it was a question of, do you have the resources, whether it is the human resource or even the financial resource to,
That's
to put
always an issue.
always an issue.
Small island developing states.
Yes.
So did you feel that you were able to still, contribute in that area effectively?
Yes. Yeah, I think, as I said, I in my addresses at those conferences, I remember some about raising raising the standard, raising the bar in teacher education, and we talk about perhaps, maybe we should have license, frequent licensing of teachers to keep them relevant. I think my first discussion was on the Education Act, which had just been, implemented, and, discussion of the role of teachers, the role of principal, the whole system. So I think I was able to make a contribution, I think, as I said, towards policy. But as I said, when I look back, there are some things that could have been pursued a little more vigorously. But as I said, I understood that the question of resources. Again, at a regional level, because I had been in regional education, as I was the secretary of the Association of Caribbean Tertiary Education System, Association of Caribbean Tertiary Institutions.
Okay.
So I was known regionally. So even then, I was always very often invited to give keynote addresses at conferences in the region. I got UWI. I remember going to the College of the Bahamas to talk about, regional education, a form. I remember one of my topics was form, style, and content, and in regional education, so that the integration of the education system in the region at the tertiary level, and how the articulation, of institutions from, let's say, tertiary, like community colleges, to institutes, to UWI, and further.
Which is kind of like an offshoot of your particular research field of research.
Research at the doctoral level. So again, and so I did that at the regional level. I remember my first one was at Edison Teachers Training College, and and it was looking at, is it new ideas or it was equity in education and issues like that. And at the international level too, I worked with the Commonwealth Secretariat, with UNESCO, with the University of Bristol, again because I had kept my association with my doctoral supervisor, who was in charge of well, I had helped set up a small states research unit at the University of Bristol with him. So we continued to collaborate and with his assistance, and also, I published some things in international journals in my own
That's
way.
the next thing that I was going to ask you. This is so unusual that a sitting head of state is actively engaging in academic practice, publishing journal articles and so on. I think that St. Lucians, when they find out more about your activities, will be very impressed.
I was a bit practical. I went into the position. I wasn't sure how long it's going. The position of Governor General, contrary to what some people think, doesn't have a term limit.
Yes.
It just says at the pleasure of Her Majesty. Yes. And we can interpret that in many ways. So you went in there, you could have spent 6 months, or in my case, I spent 20 years. So it wasn't a question of getting there and just shutting out, because you still, had to figure out, what you're going to do in the years to come. And I didn't. And I felt that I needed to remain and in that environment. So I wrote. I had UNESCO. I was invited on a few occasions to talk about tertiary education, particularly, I thought it was 2000, I'm not quite sure yet, but I don't quite remember the date, but UNESCO was looking at world tertiary education,
Okay.
policy, and
Well, I'm happy to know that you kept your hand,
yes, very
in,
much so.
So that you can return to that world as soon as you recovered
Yeah,
from your.
yeah. And it was not just only education, because my last keynote address at Bristol was on sustainable development,
Okay.
because the topic was environmental uncertainty,
I
living
see.
at the edge
Okay, right.
of environmental
Very,
uncertainty
very relevant
in
for
small,
our context.
in small states.
Yes.
Yeah. And in the UN too, I was in Mauritius at the conference, the second conference on small island states, but this time I'm talking about culture.
Okay.
So
Another one of your fortes.
yeah. And I think it was at that conference that the UN kind of accepted culture as what we call the fourth pillar of sustainable
I
development.
see.
Before that, it was the environment, economics, and the social aspect.
So now
But
culture
became one of the, and it was called
Excellent.
the fourth pillar
Okay.
of sustainable development.
I want to go back a little bit to something that you said. Governors General serve as at the pleasure of Her Majesty.
That's what's written in the Constitution of St. Lucia.
Traditionally speaking, or before you came to break the mold of what a Governor General is, we here in St. Lucia interpreted that to mean at the pleasure of the incoming administration. But when Sir John Compton's United Workers' Party won the 2006 election, you stayed on. Talk to me about that.
Well, I mean, it is not incorrect to say that it is at the pleasure of the government, of the administration of the day, because it is their prerogative to inform, Her Majesty of, who they would like to serve as Governor General.
So how did that conversation go between you and Sir John?
And Sir John, I mean, well, we never discussed it. I mean, there was the election, I was Governor General, there were things to be done, there was the Prime Minister to appoint, nobody said anything. I was not about to say, hey, am I staying, am I staying? I didn't see why I
it's his decision, really, to decide.
But somebody did ask him, about, the poster. And his response then was, he's not about to play political football with the office of Governor General. So that's, I stayed. But he never, discussed with me and say, well, Your Excellency, I think I would like you to stay. He just accepted.
It was just moving on, business as usual.
Business as usual. And then shortly afterwards, of course, he passed, and I saw in Honorable Stevenson King, there was no question, also.
Do you see that as being just how things worked out, or do you see that as being a fundamental shift in, or what you thought was a fundamental shift in the way that St. Lucian politics was being conducted? Because, I mean, before you, every time we've changed administrations, we've changed our Governor General.
I thought, well, I don't know. I may have been, not quite correct, but I thought it was an indication of our growing up, our maturity as a nation. Okay. That, for one thing, the Governor General is expected to be impartial, neutral, apolitical. Yeah. So I think I deliberately remained impartial, apolitical. I didn't comment, at least not overtly, And so I never had any real reason to either offend whichever administration was in power. And I think that perhaps, even if I say so myself, that may have been, one of the reasons why incoming administrations didn't really see the need um, to make that kind of change-ish time, And in fact, we seem to have been in some way the envy of some of the other islands in the Caribbean, and they said, well, St. Lucia is a mature, a mature society.
So the other islands looked at that continuation.
As a sense of maturity in governance, and and they said, I wish it would happen in some cases. So I smiled demurely and thought, well,
of course,
this is St. Lucia.
Of course. But I do think that a lot of St. Lucians saw that as something special as well. That it was not, the usual changeover, and that there was a sense of stability.
Yes. Yeah. That helps. Yes. If you the constant changing. I mean, as I say, in my case, 20 years is almost a lifetime. Yeah. So change had to come. Yes. But but there have been previous in some of the previous administrations where the change was perhaps a bit too often and too sudden. Yeah. And I have to admit, in most cases where it was, and as you say, it's not in most cases because you had to change each time. Maybe because it was political figures who were appointed. Yes. So when the administration changed, the new administration, sort of perhaps felt that, there was not going to be this impartiality. Yeah. And I think that may have been the reason why, this change. Yeah.
Well, as you said, change has to happen, and all good things have to come to an end. Unfortunately, our interview has to come to an end very soon. I could stay here all day to speak to you, but I know that you have other things to do with your life.
Well.
What I wanted to ask you in closing, I mean, we began on this note that the idea that assuming a position as head of state is a grave responsibility, and there is a lot that comes with it. So looking forward to the impending ascension of somebody new to that position, what is there that maybe you wish you had known before that you know now that you would like Mr. Snack to be aware of as he looks forward to that date?
Well, some practical things and some, more ideological. Some of the practical things were, I wish I knew then the terms and conditions of office.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I have to admit, when I came in, all I knew, and for example, I mean, I hadn't studied the Constitution, so I didn't know was at the pleasure of Her Majesty. I mean, I was asked, and to be honest, afterwards I said, but you said yes, you didn't ask how long you were there for, what was your remuneration going to be, what are the other terms and conditions. It took me a while to find out what were the terms and conditions of the office of Governor General. So I'm saying, things like that, I was suggesting to those preparing Mr. Snack that a briefing document be prepared, for him. Things like that. What are your yearly leave entitlements? Things like that. What are you responsible for?
All these practical
matters. Because then, there is this misconception that the government meets every expense of the Governor General, but the Governor General has to see about her own living. I mean, she has to eat, or he or she has to eat. Yes. So you are responsible for that. The Governor General doesn't get a clothing allowance. The Governor General.
Do you mean to tell me that all of those fabulous hats were paid for out of your own pocket?
Out of my own pocket. Wow. A lot of people, I mean, the fact that they assume it is met. from the public purse, sometimes I say, well, maybe the government should take a hint from that.
And fund these things,
you know.
yes.
So these are the kinds of things, you know, as I say, practical things that you know, this is, and so things don't come, you know, on you, you know, like you don't get an entertainment allowance, a private entertainment allowance, and things like that. So a briefing document, I think, you know, prepared for anybody coming into a position should at least, you know, at the least know that, you know. And the other things was really, you know, how you deal with all the conflicting, you know, perspectives. One of the things, as one of the guidelines, was the Governor General doesn't give interviews to the press. Now, when you came in, that's what you were given. And so for a very long time, I didn't give interviews to the press. Until maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, I rethought it and I said, you know, times change. We're now living in the information age, you know. And so if, you know, you wouldn't, I didn't speak on matters of policy. Or I wouldn't say matters of policy, controversy.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I would, if they asked me about a particular policy, yes, I think, you know, that kind of. So I started, you know, giving interviews, you know, to the press. In the beginning, more personal, but in some instances, you know, talking about policy. And then for that reason, I said people need to know what's happening, otherwise they're going to speculate, and very often they come up with the wrong thing. And I thought I saw it as another way of documenting our history. You know, we're not very good at doing, you know, at writing down our history.
Yes.
And so, for example, now you'll have a lot of things where it's the first time that was done. Well, it's not the first time. Every time I say, but how you mean it's the first? But, you know, don't blame the people because, you know, it's not documented anywhere. And so I thought even those interviews, you know, would be, you know, sort of multimedia kind of ways of archival, you know, of documenting, you know, bits and pieces of St. Lucian history. So that is why, you know, I relaxed this idea of giving interviews to the press or to journalists or whatever, both locally and internationally.
So do you hope our new Governor General continues that accessibility that?
Well, I you know, I should hope so. I think, you know, persons have come to expect that, and I said much more so. I think these days social media, you know, has gone on the other side. So
An
you
Office
might
of the Governor General Facebook account, you think?
well,
might be?
yes. In fact, we had started a website, but the Facebook account, you know, are kind of restricted, so that people get to know what the Governor General is doing on a daily basis. You know, you probably don't have to advertise the movements before. That's for security reasons.
Yes.
But, you know, activities, the Governor General's engagements, and so that people get to know. I think people, because they will speculate, it was this or that. So I think, you know, this is my idea of public education. These are things people need to know. You know, and so you are in. So when they make a comment, that it should be from an informed position, and not just simply speculation or gut feeling or anything like that.
And finally, from me, looking ahead for Her Excellency Dame Pearlette Louisy, what's next?
Well, in the next few weeks, I'm going to sort of organize myself as a, you know.
I mean, we all know that you need your chill out period.
But I think I'm going to continue some of the initiatives that I started. There are some of the programs and some initiatives that are constitutional in the sense that the Governor General is patron of this, that, or the other. But there are other projects or programs that I was involved in, mainly from interest.
Okay.
So some of these, you know, I'll continue in the initial, you know, in the first few years, like the Nobel Laureate Festival and things like that. So I'm going to continue that. I'm going to work on continue to work on my promotion of the Creole language. I've been working on a project with Professor Simmons McDonald for introduction of literature in schools.
Exciting.
You know, we've started. We've done about two grades, pre-K and K,
Oh.
and so I think we have another two grades to do.
Wonderful.
So when she has retired, she's still in Barbados, but when she's probably a little freer now, so we'll continue on that.
That sounds like a fantastic topic for another episode of my show.
Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. I'll continue with my academic work, and particularly with the issue of small states. That's one of my interests. Both education in small states and sustainable development in small
Excellent.
states.
Well, thank you so very much for your time
Yeah.
today. I think,
You're most
you know, the
welcome.
fascination with you, both as the head of state and just as a person, is not going to end anytime soon. So I thank you for providing this little insight into what it was like as the head of state of St. Lucia.
Yes, it was good. As I said to everybody, it was an incredible journey from Labrie to Mount Fortune.
Amazing. Amazing. Walking in heels.
Yeah, yeah, that one was walking.
running in heels.
Well, running in heels was because running in the political sense.
Yes,
But
yes.
that one was.
You had a nice walk.
It was
Thank
a
you
trek.
so much. A trek, indeed,
trek,
indeed,
a
indeed.
trek.